In this lesson, we're going to be talking about Revit's application menu. And we can find the application menu underneath the big R in the upper left-hand corner of the program. So go ahead and move your mouse up and click on the big R. Under the big R, this is the application menu. And there's a variety of options underneath it. The first option is going to be New. And New is going to allow us to be able to create new Revit projects. Also, this is where we can create new Revit family files, as well as a variety of other different kinds of new Revit content. The application menu also allows us to be able to open up content. So by moving over to Open and just hovering over it, we could then move over and open up a project, open up a Revit family file. Also, we could open up an IFC file. IFC files stand for Industry Foundation Class. And what this allows you to do is if someone else has a different BIM software program other than Revit, they can save their files out as an IFC file, and then you can open them up in Revit as an IFC file. There's the option to be able to save. There's also the ability to be able to save as, which allows you to save your project with the same information but with a different name associated with it. There's Save as Template. Save as Template allows you to save out your Revit project and then be able to use those same settings that you set up inside of your Revit project again and again and again in future projects. You can also do a Save As Library and then save as your Revit families, groups, and views out onto either your computer or out into a network location. What this allows you to do is be able to reuse that Revit content that you've set up again in future projects. Examples of this would be a custom piece of furniture you may have created inside of your Revit project, or maybe a custom door schedule or a room finish schedule that you've saved out. These can all be saved out as library files, put out into a network location, and then loaded back into Revit whenever you're going to be doing future projects. There's Export. This allows you to be able to export out your Revit information out to DWG files, DGN files, those same IFC files I was talking about earlier. So if someone is using other different programs other than Revit, they can then be able to utilize this information.
There's an option here for suite workflows.
I currently don't have other Autodesk programs loaded up on this computer, but if I did, I would then be able to select those programs off of the list and be able to directly share from Revit into some of those other programs. Publish. Publish allows you to be able to quickly print off DWF, DWG, DXF, DGN, and SAT files, and then be able to share those out to the Autodesk Buzzsaw site. Print does what it sounds like. Then there's also options down here at the bottom of the screen. And if you choose options, you'll see that you have the ability to be able to choose how long you want to go between being reminded to save, such in this case, it's every 30 minutes. You also have the choice of every 1 hour, every 2 hours, every 4 hours, or never being reminded to save at all. Now, the reason why it reminds you to save instead of automatically saving your Revit files is because some of these Revit files can get to be quite large. So as a result of that, you wouldn't want to be forced to save a 150 meg Revit file after 30 minutes has elapsed. It could just take too long to be able to do. So as a result of that, it'll remind you after 30 minutes, and then whenever you get a good breaking point to save, you'll have the opportunity to be able to do it. There's User Interface. User Interface allows you to change the way certain things display on your screen, such as which tabs are going to show up on your ribbon going across the top of your screen. Also, this is where you can customize your keyboard shortcuts. And if you click on Customize, you'll be able to see some two-letter combinations. These are two-letter combinations you can type on your keyboard, and it'll automatically execute the command that two-letter combination is next to on this list. I'm going to go ahead and click on OK to that. There's double-click options, and if you click on Customize next to double-click options, this is what will happen if you double-click on that kind of object inside of Revit. For instance, if I wanted to double-click on a Revit family, right now it would automatically try to edit that family. But if I didn't want it to edit the family, I could either tell it to do nothing, or I could tell it to edit the type. And editing the type would be able to change specific information associated with that family, without changing the way that the shape of that family would look, for instance. I'm going to go ahead and click on OK to that. A couple other tabs I want to point out here. One is Graphics. Some people like to do invert background in order to be able to give them a black drawing area. I find that a lot of people who have used AutoCAD in the past, which always has had a black drawing area, like to invert their background colors. This is also where you can change some of the other colors that are associated with Revit. Also, there's an option here called File Locations. And if you choose on File Locations, you can set up where all your default content is located at, whether it's on your computer, whether or not it's on a network location on the server. That information can be changed through here. And all of this was underneath the Options menu. I'm going to click on OK here on the Applications menu. So those are the different options associated with your Applications menu. The ribbon allows us to execute different commands inside of Revit. We can find that ribbon going across the top of our screen. In this case, it's saying wall, door, window, and it's giving us a variety of different commands that we can execute. If we click on one of the different tabs going across the top, such as the Structure tab, we can now see a different variety of commands associated with that particular tab. You could also move over to the Annotate tab, click on the Annotate tab, and see your different annotation tools, which will include your dimensions, your drawing tools, such as line work, arcs, circles. There's the ability to do text, and all these show up as different commands on your ribbon. Now, if we move back over again and select on Architecture to see the Architecture tools, we'll begin to notice there's also different categories on our ribbon. These different categories, they're also called panels, include the Build, Circulation, Model, and they're named after the different tools that happen to be on that particular panel. Since we're talking about panels, I do want to mention that if you want to be able to move a panel to a different location, it is possible to do. All you have to do is highlight over the bar there at the bottom of your screen, left click and hold your mouse button down, and you can drag that panel either to a different location on your ribbon or just somewhere out on your screen and let it sit there so that you have those commands in a more easily available area to be able to click on and execute. If you want to be able to bring that panel back up to your ribbon, all you have to do is move your mouse up, click, hold your mouse button down, drag it back up to the location you'd like to be at, and then when you see that gray area show up, just let go of the button and it'll automatically dock itself back onto that panel. One other thing to know about the ribbon as far as being able to reorganize this different information, if you don't like the location of where one of these is located at, for instance, maybe you'd want structure in front of architecture, if that's the case, all you have to do is hold down the Control key on your keyboard, left click and hold down your mouse button on the tab that you want to be able to move over, and then you can drag this over and let go in order to be able to rearrange the tabs on the ribbon. So once again, if you want to be able to move this structure, so in this case it's on the other side of the architecture, all you'd have to do is hold Control down on your keyboard, move your mouse up here, left click, hold the mouse button down and drag it over, and you can drag that over to any place you want along your ribbon. Now on the ribbon, there's a variety of different buttons, and that's actually what we're looking at here. So here you can see I have beam and wall and column. If I highlight here on Architecture and click on the Architecture tab, we have different commands. Now if I highlight over the word door, we can see that the door button highlights. It also gives us this little flyout menu that first starts off by saying, what does this command do? In this case, it says door, adds door to the building model. Then if you highlight over it for about 1 second, it'll automatically pop up an illustration showing what the command does or what it adds. We can illustrate this as well by moving over the word window here, seeing the one window, and then seeing it expand itself out to illustrate how windows work. One thing I do want to mention is based on the resolution of your computer screen, these buttons might be slightly different sizes. In other words, your window button might be the same size as what my door button is. Right now I'm working on a small computer screen at a lower resolution. So as a result of that, you'll find that the ribbon will automatically resize its commands based on the amount of screen real estate that you have available to you. So your window button might be larger, same size as my door button, and that's okay. It executes the same command. Now there are different kinds of buttons available inside of Revit as well. This is just your standard button, and if you would click on door, you'll see it automatically executes the door command. To get out of a command in Revit, all you have to do is hit the escape key on your keyboard. There are two other kinds of buttons though that you need to know about. The first kind of button is going to be called a drop-down button. And you can see that whenever there's this little dark triangle next to a command. If you click on that little dark triangle, you'll get a variety of different commands which are associated with that command. In this case, I'm seeing structural column as well as column architectural. We can see that as well over here where we have stairs. That little down arrow, click on it, and it gives us a variety of different options associated with that command. And once again, this is called the drop-down button. There's also a split button inside the program, and walls is an excellent example of a split button because it has this button and it's split into two different categories. The first picture is activating whatever the default option is, so just drawing a default regular wall. But if you want to be able to pick on the kind of wall that you want to be able to do, you can move down here to where it says wall, and you can select on the word wall. And this will give you a drop-down list of do you want to do architectural walls, structural walls, or different commands related to the wall command. So the ribbon allows you to be able to execute a variety of different commands, which will then have functions inside of Revit. The options bar allows us to control the different options associated with a command. Now the options bar is very easy to miss because it's just this gray bar going across the top of our screen. But when you execute a command that has different options associated with it, we'll be able to do different things with the options bar. In order to be able to see this, let's move our mouse underneath the Architecture tab over the picture of the wall and click on the picture of the wall. Here we'll see that the options bar is now populated with a variety of different options associated with this particular command. For instance, it now has a pull-down menu asking us questions related to the depth or the height of our wall. There's a menu here that's going to allow us to be able to click inside of it, highlight the information, and if we wanted to type in a different height for our wall, we could do it. The options bar also allows us to be able to check or uncheck different options in order to be able to turn on and turn off different functions. So the options bar allows us to be able to change different options associated with individual commands.
Two areas that are vital to you when you're going to be using Revit are the properties and the project browser. Now, one of the things to know about the properties and project browser is that they don't have to be located where they currently are on the screen. If you click on just the title of one of them, you can hold your mouse button down and then you can drag this off and then let go, and you'll see that the properties or the project browser, depending on which one that you selected, can get pulled off. It can then get moved to another spot on the screen. It can go to another monitor if you want. So as a result of that, you can do all of your drawing on one monitor. And if you have a second monitor, the project browser and properties can be over there on the other monitor, just sitting out there in space. Also, if you do like the fact that those two were docked on top of each other the way that they were, I want to point out that there's an interesting thing that can accidentally happen. If you're moving around and you're starting to activate commands up here on the screen, you may accidentally click an X in the upper corner and close one of them down. If one of them ever gets closed down, it's not immediately evident how you get that to be brought back up again. So to get them back, come up here to the View tab, select on User Interface, and then look for the one that does not have a check mark next to it. In this case, it's my project browser, so I'm going to put a check next to it, and we can see that the project browser has come back. If I happen to be working in here again and accidentally close properties, I could do the same thing. Come underneath User Interface and put a check mark next to properties. Virtually everyone who has ever used Revit has accidentally closed one of these down at one time or another and wondered, how do I get these back? And that is the answer. Come up to View, User Interface, and then put a check mark next to the appropriate thing. Finally, I also want to point out that these can both take up the exact same spot on the screen as well. In order to do that, you just select on one of these bars, pull it over so they're sort of directly on top of each other. And when you do that, the project browser and the properties will have tabs down at the bottom of the screen. And you can flip between those two tabs by just clicking on either properties or the project browser tab. So you can have them either on or off by clicking on the little X's. If you want to turn them back on again, you can come over here to the user interface and put a check mark next to them. And if you want to have them docked on top of each other, which is the way that I usually prefer to work, then you can drag them directly on top of each other, let go of your mouse button, and then the project browser and then the properties buttons will be down here at the bottom of the screen, and then you can just click on the appropriate tab to execute the appropriate tools over on the side.
The project browser in Revit allows us to be able to categorize and organize the different views that we have in our Revit project. In order to understand this better, move your mouse over here to your project browser. And there's a good chance you'll see up at the very top of the project browser a category called Views. Now, if all these views aren't showing up the way that we're looking at them on the screen right now, I do want to point out that if you select on the little plus sign that would show up there, it'll expand these different categories out. If you still have any of these categories closed down, such as floor plan views, for instance, if you select on the little plus next to the floor plan views, it'll expand that category out. Now, like you've seen me doing here, perhaps maybe you have a category of different kinds of views that you don't want to be able to see. For instance, if I'm doing my construction documents, I might not want to see all my different 3D views, or I might not want to be able to see all my different renderings open on the screen. In order to be able to close the titles for these views down, it's just a matter of selecting on the little minus sign next to the title, and it'll automatically close that particular category down, so you're not having to sort through hundreds of different views as you're doing your construction documents. As we can see here, you can scroll up and scroll down by clicking on the little bar here at the side, and then holding your mouse button down in order to be able to drag it up and drag it down. We can also click on the arrows in order to be able to have it go up or have it go down. One other thing that you can do, as long as you've clicked in somewhere inside the project browser, is you can use the wheel on your wheel mouse in order to be able to scroll up or scroll down inside the project browser. In order to be able to open the views under the project browser, double click where it has one of the levels. In this case, I'm going to do level 1 underneath floor plans. And we'll see that view will open up in your drawing window. You can do the same thing on any of these other categories. For instance, I'm going to double click underneath elevations, building elevation. I'm going to double click very quickly on the word south. And now we can see our south elevation view of our building. Doing the same thing, we can do this with schedules. I'm going to double click with planning schedule. This is one of the schedules that's inside the project, as well as with our sheets. And by double clicking the A001 title sheet underneath the sheets category, we'll see the original view that we had open. One other thing that you can do with the project browser, other than just opening these views over here on the side, is that you can move your mouse over here and just click where it has the words view and all. Then if you right click, there's an option there for browser organization. Select on browser organization. Then by putting a check mark in any of these different categories, we can put these in order by discipline, by those views that are not currently placed onto a sheet, so they're not currently in our construction documents, by phase, so existing, new construction, and demolition, and type and discipline, which is very similar to discipline. I will point out that if we click on discipline and select on OK, that our project browser will automatically organize based on those categories. If we'd had structural drawings, MEP drawings, we'd see those categories underneath here. Right now, we just have our architectural plans and what's considered our coordination plans, which combine the information from our mechanical, structural, and architectural all in the one view. And that's how that's currently organized underneath the project browser. Now, if we want to be able to bring that back, highlight where views and discipline is at, right-click again, select on project or browser organization, and then change this back to all and click on OK. And this will once again reorganize these so it's no longer underneath the particular discipline, but it's back to just all of our floor plan views, all of our 3D views, all of our elevation views, etc. So the purpose of the project browser is to be able to quickly organize and view all the data which is associated with our project.